Well, so one of the nice things of from the internet is, for example, somebody like you can have a bigger voice than almost anybody at the particular institutions we're talking about.
That's true. But the thing is, I might say something. You can count on the fact that the, provost at Princeton isn't going to say anything.
What do you mean? Too afraid?
Well, if that person were to give an interview, how are things going in research at Princeton? Well, I'm hesitant to say it, but they're perhaps as good as they've ever been, and I think they're going to get better. Oh, is that right? All fields? Yep. I don't see a weak one. It's just like, okay, great. Who are you, and what are you even saying? We're just used to total nonsense 24/7.
Yeah. What do you think might be a beautiful thing that comes out of this? Like, what is there a hope that, like, a little inkling, a little fire of hope you have about our time right now?
Yeah, I think one thing is coming to understand that the freaks, weirdos, mutants, and other ne'er-do-wells, sometimes referred to as grifters. I like that one, grifters, and gadflies were very often the earliest people on the coronavirus. That's a really interesting question. Why was that? And it seems to be that they had already paid such a social price that they weren't going to be beaten up by being told that, oh my God, you're xenophobic. You just hate China, or wow, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. So if you'd already paid those prices, you were free to think about this. And everyone in an institutional framework was terrified that they didn't want to be seen as the alarmist, the Chicken Little. And so that's why you have this confidence where, de Blasio says, get on with your lives, get back in there and celebrate Chinese New Year in Chinatown, despite coronavirus. It's like, okay, really? So you just always thought everything would automatically be okay if you adopted that posture.
So you think this time reveals the weakness of our institutions and reveals the strength of our gadflies and the weirdos and the...
No, not necessarily the strength, but the value of freedom. Like, a different way of saying it would be, wow, even your gadflies and your grifters were able to beat your institutional folks because your institutional folks were playing with a giant mental handicap. So just imagine, like, we were in the story of Harrison Bergeron by Vonnegut, and our smartest people were all subjected to distracting noises every 7 seconds. Well, they would be functionally much dumber because they couldn't continue a thought through all the disturbance. So in some sense, that's a little bit like what belonging to an institution is that if you have to make a public statement, of course the Surgeon General is going to be the worst. Because they're just playing with too much of a handicap. There are too many institutional players who are like, don't screw us up. And so the person has to say something wrong. We're going to back propagate a falsehood. And this is very interesting. Some of my socially oriented friends say, Eric, I don't understand what you're on about. Of course masks work, but you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to get us not to buy up the masks for the doctors. And I think, okay, so you imagine that we can just create scientific fiction at will so that you can run whatever social program you want? This is what my point is, get out of my lab. Get out of the lab. You don't belong in the lab. You're not meant for the lab. You're constitutionally incapable of being around a lab. You need to leave the lab.
You think the CDC and WHO knew that masks work and were trying to sort of imagine that people are kind of stupid and they would buy masks in excess if they were told that masks work? Is that like, because this does seem to be a particularly clear example of mistakes made.
You're asking me this question?
Yeah.
No, you're not. What do you think, Lex?
Well, I actually probably disagree with you a little bit.
Great, let's do it.
I think it's not so easy to be honest with the populace when the danger of panic is always around the corner. So I think the kind of honesty you exhibit appeals to a certain class of brave intellectual minds that it appeals to me. But I don't know from the perspective of WHO, I don't know if it's so obvious that they should be honest 100% of the time with people.
I'm not saying you should be perfectly transparent and 100% honest. I'm saying that the quality of your lies has to be very high and it has to be public spirited. There's a big difference between. So I'm not a child about this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that when you're at war, for example, you turn over all of your plans to the enemy because it's important that you're transparent with 360-degree visibility. Far from it. What I'm saying is something has been forgotten, and I forgot who it was who told it to me, but it was a fellow graduate student in the Harvard math department. And he said, I learned one thing being out in the workforce, because he was one of the few people who had a work life in the department as a grad student. And he said, you can be friends with your boss, but if you're going to be friends with your boss, you have to be doing a good job at work. And there's an analog here, which is, if you're going to be reasonably honest with the population, you have to be doing a good job at work as the Surgeon General or as the head of the CDC. So if you're doing a terrible job, you're supposed to resign. And then the next person is supposed to say, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I inherited the situation. It was in a bit of disarray. But I had several requirements before I agreed to step in and take the job, because I needed to know I could turn it around. I needed to know that I had clear lines of authority. I needed to know that I had the resources available in order to rectify the problem. And I needed to know that I had the ability and the freedom to level with the American people directly as I saw fit. All of my wishes were granted. And that's why I'm happy here on Monday morning. I've got my sleeves rolled up. Boy, do we got a lot to do. So please come back in 2 weeks and then ask me how I'm doing then. And I hope to have something to show you. That's how you do it.
So why is that excellence and basic competence missing?
The big nap. You see, you come from multiple traditions where it was very important to remember things. Yeah. The Soviet tradition made sure that you remembered the sacrifices that came in that war. And the Jewish tradition, we're doing this on Passover, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, every year we tell one simple story. Well, why can't it be different every year? Maybe we could have a rotating series of 7 stories. Because it's the one story that you need. It's like, you work with the Men in Black group, right? And it's the last suit that you'll ever need. This is the last story that you ever need. Don't think I fell for your neuralizer last time. In any event, we tell one story because it's the get out of Dodge story. There's a time when you need to not wait for the bread to rise. And that's the thing, which is, even if you live through a great nap, you deserve to know what it feels like to have to leave everything that has become comfortable and unworkable.
It's sad that you need that tragedy, I imagine, to have the tradition of remembering. It's sad to think that because things have been nice and comfortable means that we can't have great, competent leaders, which is kind of the implied statement. Like, can we have great leaders who take big risks, who inspire hard work, who deal with difficult truth, even though things have been comfortable?
Well, we know what those people sound like. I mean, if, for example, Jocko Willink suddenly threw his hat into the ring, everyone would say, okay, right, party's over. It's time to get up at 4:30 and really work hard, and we've got to get back into fighting shape. And
yeah, but Jocko is a very special. I think that whole group of people, by profession, put themselves in the way of into hardship on a daily basis, and he's not. I don't know, but he's probably not going to be. Well, could Jocko be president?
Okay, but it doesn't have to be Jocko, right? Like, in other words, if it was Kai Lenny or if it was Alex Honnold from rock climbing.
Right, but
they're just serious people. They're serious people who can't afford your BS.
Yeah, but why do we have serious people that do rock climbing and don't have serious people who lead the nation? That seems
because that was those skills needed in rock climbing are not good during the big nap. And at the tail end of the big nap, they would get you fired.
But don't you think there's the fundamental part of human nature that desires to excel, to be exceptionally good at your job?
Yeah, but what is your job? I mean, in other words, my point to you is if you're a general in a peacetime army and your major activity is playing war games, what if the skills needed to win war games are very different than the skills needed to win wars, because you know how the war games are scored, and you've done Moneyball, for example, with war games. You figured out how to win games on paper. So then the advancement skill becomes divergent from the ultimate skill that it was proxying for.
Yeah, but we're good as human beings to, I mean, at least me, I can't do a big nap. So at any one moment when I finish something, a new dream pops up. So
right.
Going to Mars.
What do you like to do? You like to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, first of all, I like to do everything.
You like to play guitar?
Guitar.
You do this podcast. You do theory. You're constantly taking risks and exposing yourself, right? Why? Because you got one of those crazy, I'm sorry to say it, you got an Eastern European Jewish personality, which I'm still tied to. And I'm a couple generations more distant than you are. And I've held on to that thing because it's valuable to me.
You don't think there's a huge percent of the populace, even in the United States, that's that? It might be a little bit dormant, but...
Do you know Anna Khachian from the Red Scare podcast?
Did you interview her?
Yeah.
Yeah. I listened. Yeah. She was great.
She was great, right?
Yeah, she was fun.
She's terrific. But she also has the same thing going on. And I made a joke in the liner notes for that episode, which is somewhere on the road from Stalingrad to Forever 21, something was lost. Like, how can Stalingrad and Forever 21 be in the same sentence? And, in part, it's that weird thing. It's like trying to remember. Even words, like I'm in Russian and Hebrew, things like, it's like what pomyat and liskor, these words have much more potency about memory. And
I don't know. I think there's still a dormant populace that craves leaders on a small scale and large scale. And I hope to be that leader on a small scale. And I think you, sir, have a role to be a leader.
You kids go ahead without me. I'm gonna do a little bit of weird podcasting.
See, now you're putting on your Joe Rogan hat. He says, I'm just a comedian.
Oh, no, I'm not.
You say, I'm just
No, it's not that. If I say I want to lead too much because of the big nap, there's like a group, a chorus of automated idiots. Mm-hmm. And their first thought is like, I knew it. This was a power grab all along. Why should you lead? Just like, and so the idea is you're just trying to skirt around, not stepping on all of the idiot landmines. It's like, okay, so now I'm going to hear that in my inbox for the next 3 days.
Okay, so lead by example. Just live.
No, I mean,
the large platform.
Look, we should take over the institutions. There are institutions. We've got bad leadership. We should mutiny, and we should inject 15%, 20% disagreeable, dissident, very aggressive, loner individual, mutant freaks, all the people that you go to see Avengers movies about, or the X-Men, or whatever it is, and stop pretending that everything good comes out of some great, giant, inclusive, communal 12-hour meeting. It's like, stop it. That's not how shit happens.